and by marriage's father. Be med student in North Vietnam. Be drafted into NVA as a medic. Can't wait to kill some capitalist pig dogs for the glorious revolution. Get sent to a joint NVA/VC operation. NVA officers and specialists, VC foot soldiers. Kept in the dark about mission details. Team arrives in coastal fishing town. Meet up with contact. Contact briefs them on mission. Team will be carried to a large island, miles offshore. Island has an old abandoned airstrip from World War II. Plan is to booby-trap the fuck out of the island. Make it unusable for the US. Hole up in the surrounding jungle and ambush American soldiers as they enter. Morning of the operation. Boarding fishing boats. Boats have crates of supplies under nets and shit. Notice they have a ton of ammunition, explosives, and tools. Only about a week's supply of food and water. Uncle points this out to the commander, named Quan. Quan assures him that the NVA will pick them up after the Americans flee. Also, that the Viet Cong foot soldiers with them are rural people who are used to living off of the land. If there's a delay, the VC can forage for food. Uncle is a bit unnerved, but still excited to do his part for the revolution. Fishermen drop them off on island. Haul ass unloading supplies and equipment. Set up camp in the woods. Start turning likely landing areas into a death trap. Punji pits, Japanese landmines, tripwires, etc. Hidden machine gun nests. Subtle range markers for sniper made. Fuck up non-overgrown parts of the landing strip. Watch for ships and aircraft constantly. Some nights, Uncle sits on a log watching the horizon with an SKS. 4 days in, Americans still haven't showed up. One of the head booby trap guys is having trouble installing some kind of explosive trap. Asks for one of the other experts and his assistant to come take a look. Other guy tinkers with it. Boom. Bits of half the booby trap team come raining down. Surviving experts realize they neglected to mark where many of the now dead men's traps are located. Quan is pissed as fuck. Orders everyone to be careful as hell about setting off traps. 1 week in, out of water, running low on rations. Somebody got hung up in an unmarked foot trap. Uncle used a ton of antibiotics treating him. 2 weeks in, VC guys stretched food supply for a while with edible plants and wildlife, but there's too many people to feed. The second in command gets bit by a snake, has a major allergic reaction to the venom, dies. 3 weeks. Everyone is starving. Quan and other officers are getting the lion's share of whatever is left to eat. Still, no Americans. People getting pissed at officers. 3.5 weeks. See US ships in the distance. Aircraft flying overhead. Prepare for battle. Something's wrong. They're not coming closer. Realize ships are passing the island, heading towards the mainland. See smoke on the horizon. Hear distant explosions. Realize the Americans aren't coming to the island. Realize their contacts and prayed for extraction team probably just got blown up. They are now on their own. Very fucking hungry at this point. City guy kills a snake. Doesn't cut the head off before trying to prep it. Dead snake reflexively whips back and bites him. Another one bites the dust at JPEG. Someone is caught hoarding food. Gets killed by pissed off comrade. Friend of hoarder shoots his killer. Quan shoots friend. 4 weeks in. Uncle is having some serious thoughts about this whole communism and global revolution thing. Start clandestine meetings with a few other guys who don't want to die on this fucking island. Plan is to, somehow, build a raft and escape unnoticed by the hardliners. Work in shifts putting one together in a remote part of the island. Uncle wakes up to sound of gunfire. Quan tells men not to worry about it. Sniper comes walking out of the brush an hour later. Has a soaking wet bag over his shoulder. Quan states that they discovered 2 traitors plotting to escape and warned the US of their presence. He had been suspicious of one man in particular, so he had the sniper track him when he went on a foraging run. Quan orders Sniper to open the bag. Sniper dumps 2 heads on the ground. Uncle recognizes them as the co-conspirators. Sniper states that he followed the traitor to the raft and watched whoever went out that way. Waited until he'd seen another guy come out to work on it and told Quan. Quan ordered the other guy he'd spotted to try fishing on the beach near the raft area. Guy went over to check in raft first. Sniper shot them both. Quan states that he thinks there are more traitors in their midst. Uncle and other remaining conspirator realize they're in deep shit. 5 weeks in, about a dozen men left total, most of whom are fucking terrified of Quan and the sniper now. Will do anything they say in order to stay out of the wrath. Uncle and friend realize they won't ever make it off this damn island if Quan and the sniper are alive. If they're both taken out, the other guys will likely want to get off the island ASAP as well. Decide they have to kill Quan and the sniper. Uncle takes Quan, friend takes sniper. Both targets are paranoid as hell about mutiny. This is going to be difficult. 6 weeks in, Uncle plans to place a snake in Quad's bedroll. No luck catching any for a few days. One night, wake up to screaming. Blinding flashes from 3 gunshots. Quad has a body on top of him. It's one of the other soldiers. Guy tried to stab Quan in his sleep. Fucked it up though. The knife wound wasn't lethal. Quan woke up and screamed. Attacker began stabbing wildly. Quan held up an arm to block the knife, while reaching for his pistol with the other. Starts shooting wildly. Accidentally. Shoots himself. Pumps 2 rounds into the attacker. Attacker is dead, but Quan is torn up. Hacked up neck, form is cut to the bone in spots, and gunshot wound in the crook of his arm. Bleeding like crazy. Yells for Uncle to help. Uncle pulls out medical supplies. Begins patching up wounds. Gives him pills with vasodilating and blood-thinning side effects. Injects with an overdose of painkillers. Sniper is watching, but luckily knows shit about medicine. Asks Sniper to help him apply pressure to wounds. Uncle acts increasingly distraught as bleeding doesn't stop through the night. Quan dies by morning. Sniper takes command. Friend just shoots him in the head when he goes to take a dump. Uncle talks to surviving men. Says they've only got one chance to make it off this island, alive, as prisoners of war. Survivors argue over it at first, but hunger wins out. Begin setting fires all over the island. Use mortar to make loud explosions. Fire flares at night. Next day, an airplane flies low over the land. Wave white flags and do whatever they can to get attention. U.S. military sends heavily armed patrol by the island. One survivor can speak crappy English. Yells at the Americans that they're surrendering. Patrol orders men to strip naked and walk slowly with their hands in the air toward the boats. Get taken prisoner. Interrogated like crazy for intel. A few of the guys realize that they can never go home. Some agree to instruct U.S. military officers on common enemy tactics and traps in exchange for better treatment. Uncle eventually manages to make a deal of some sort that gets him released. Lives in South Vietnam for a while, then leaves for the U.S. before the communists win. Finishes medical studies, and becomes an MR. Has anyone here ever gotten creepy or mysterious phone calls or texts? Like blocked numbers calling you at 2 a.m. Now that I think about it, I did get some weird ones. There's a phone call I got from a guy in the Ohio area trying to buy drugs off of me while I was at work as a rent-a-cop. I'm not a drug dealer, a user, or involved in any way. It seemed like a just one-off random thing, but then that night, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I called it the next day after Googling, and it was a salon in Chicago. The call came in at 3 a.m. I ignored it, but then someone started trying to open the door to my apartment. I grabbed my gun and opened the door, but no one was there. We didn't sleep anymore that night. So those things together seemed to be suspicious. One time on Thanksgiving, at the same job, someone kept calling the landline for the security post and yelling in German. I only know a little German from watching World War II movies. So finally I got pissed and said, "Sprechen Sie English?" And a surprised and drunk voice replied, "Nein." So I just said, "Thank you and goodbye" in German, and he didn't call back. Like I said, I don't know German. The funniest was when some people called on a rainy night a few years ago. A guy and a girl could be heard. He kept asking for someone I never heard of, like Reggie or something, and telling me to pick him up. I kept telling him he had the wrong number, so I asked him where he was. He said so-and-so's house. I asked him where that was, and he said some intersection that was actually near me that I recognized. So I told him to go up to the next street because I hated that guy whose house he was at. So he finally called back about 40 minutes later, pissed as fuck that I wasn't there. So I just yelled, "I told you to stop calling me. I don't know who Reggie is." Not really mysterious, but a weird story. My friend told me their phone was stolen, so I sent a text to it to see if somebody might have picked it up. But the only response I got was, "Fuck off." Later, it's around midnight. I get a call from an unknown number. I answer it, and this guy tells me he's an undercover informant, and some drug dealer stole my friend's phone, and he just happened to see and memorize my number on the phone from the contacts list. He also tells me these guys know how to make bombs and are going to place them on people's doorsteps. At this point, it sounds like a threat, and that he keeps going on and on like he was trying to keep me on the phone for as long as possible. I get the suspicion that he's trying to threaten me into paying money to get the phone back, but I just hang up because, well, it was already really late. About an hour later, I get another call from a girl who's yelling at me and says that they're just trying to help. But I'm tired, and I'm really not trusting anything that these people are saying. So I decided to just hang up and turn my phone off for the night. The next day, I get a call from a police officer who offers to deliver the phone to my house if I tell him where I live. I remember this stuff about bombs and drug dealers, so I just ask if we can go to the police station to pick it up instead. And it turns out, it really was an informant who turned my friend's phone into the police. Still a pretty weird situation. My mom works at a nursing home. One day she came home, handed me her phone and said, "Tell me what you hear on my voicemail." It was an unidentified number that called, and it sounded like a guy who was running low on breath saying, "Help me." Then a bunch of static, and another, "Help me," and then the call ended. The next day, she found out one of her patients had died during the night. I used to get phone calls from a restricted number, almost nightly, between 1 to 4 a.m. I was in my early 20s at the time, so I was usually up drinking or doing other bullshit. Anyways, the caller never once said a word or made a sound. It would just be dead silence until I'd hang up. Hell, I even left my phone on the call for a whole night, and they never hung up. The weirdest part about it is if one of my friends would drunkenly talk shit to the unknown caller, trying to get a response, they themselves would start getting the phone calls too. I have friends all over the state, and in other states. Most of them have no idea who each other are, and would have no way of knowing their phone numbers. Shit, it even happened to people I was meeting for the first time. It went on for a little over a year before it stopped. I never found out who it was, or how it was done. I once got a call from a kid that said she was a friend of mine. The problem is, the kid sounded like she was about 6 years old, and it was close to midnight. She said my first name, but my first thought was that it was some poor kid trying to sneakily call her friend, who just happened to have my same name. The weird part was that I could hear an adult's voice in the background, coaching her on what to say. Like I would say, "Sorry, honey, I think you have the wrong number. There's no little kids here." And the adult would say something in the background, and the kid would insist again that she knew me. I don't know anyone with kids that age, so it was probably some kind of random prank, although I can't figure out what they expected to happen during it. I eventually hung up and they didn't call back. It was interesting, although not very spoopy. There were tons of pervert calls in the 1970s and 80s. I guess they were in style. I was a kid back then, and I was often up before my parents on weekends, which is when calls like that would often come in. Also, late at night, but my dad would generally get those first, and then would just blow a whistle into the phone. This was in California, which is also a pretty pervy state in my opinion. I usually wouldn't tell my dad about them, and as I got a little older, I would try to fuck with or intimidate the callers, which could be pretty funny. One was frightening, though, because he addressed me by my name. I tried to get as much information as I could out of the guy, although he was super disgusting, and I really wanted to hang up. Then I did tell my parents, and they called the police. I remember talking to the officer, who was very nice. I was about 12, I think. Long story short, they figured he would call again, so I think they tapped the line. And sure enough, it turned out it was a guy from our church. Apparently, he was on parole from a prison sentence for making CP. I think all of the gross questions he was asking me were kind of an interview or a lead-in to a screen test. I don't know what happened to him with reference to my case, but I did give a deposition to some attorneys, I seem to recall. The worst thing is, he's still alive. He's on the sex offender registry, and he runs a store which caters to teen boys. Gaming stuff, cards, and of course some vintage gay erotica shit. Nobody does anything about it. I think that's scarier than any of his shitty phone calls. When I was in middle school, my parents would work nights sometimes and leave me home alone. I'd usually just sit around and watch TV. Didn't really need to worry about anything happening. Nobody ever really called, but I was always told to stay near the phone in case of any emergencies. I was sitting on the couch one night, pretty late, at around 9:30 p.m., when I got a phone call. I picked it up and nobody ever answered. I didn't think much about it at the time, but I was still a little worried that maybe it was my parents, and something happened to where they couldn't get back to the phone. I told them about it in the morning, and they said it was probably a prankster, and next night, the same thing happens. And again, I say something to my parents, but they say not to worry about it. This goes on for the rest of the fucking week. Always around at the same time, and only when I'm home alone. And so, I start getting paranoid. The next Monday night when I'm home alone again, I'm pretty much staring at the TV guide clock, anticipating this. And of course, it happens again. I answer it, and I ask who it is again, but this time, I hear a voice, and what it said chills my bones to this very day. I am a heron. I have a long neck, and I pick fish out of water with my beak. If you don't give this phone call to 10 other people, I will I will fly into your kitchen and make a mess of your pots and pans. Woo. I had an overnight radio show in college, and being a girl, I got a call nearly every week from a guy telling me how sexy my voice was. It isn't, and that he was going to come find me at the station. I usually walked with a big burly guy who was the music director, but one night, I was there all by myself. Stalker guy calls, tells me he's going to come get me after my shift. I fake enthusiasm. I tell him I'm short with long brown hair and brown eyes, and not at all what I look like, and then I walk home in the dark, scared as shit. Not really scary or mystical or anything, but I've read other stories on here talking about this, and it's sort of an unspoken rule in certain parts of the army. Ask engineers or MPs or chemical guys and they'll probably know about this stuff. It's just something that happens sometimes. Be me, 19, stupid kid, enlisted after a few months of failing college courses because I realized I had no self-discipline. Joined up as MP and went to basic in the fucking winter because I was a dumbass. We're on our last FTX, way the fuck out in the woods for the longest week ever. It's -15 at night. We're all freezing to death, life sucks, etc. Our PG comes around to check on everyone periodically. We're all bored because the other platoons are too cold to attack us, and the drill sergeants are too cold to play fucking games. I'm sitting there with my battle buddy. We're on the most isolated corner of the perimeter, which only existed because we picked a bad spot to set up in. It's like 20 meters to the next guy, on one side, and there's a little hill so we can't even see the next people to the left of us. I go to sleep for a little. My buddy says he can stay awake by himself. Next thing I know, PG is kicking the shit out of my boot. There's like 10 people running off into the woods, in my sector of fire. Apparently, someone went off to shit, didn't have a battle buddy with them, and after they didn't come back for like 30 minutes, the PG found out. At this point, the pretend exercise shit had been abandoned, and everyone's gearing up to go look for this guy. My buddy keeps insisting the guy didn't go out past the perimeter. We have a good view from our little foxhole, and he was awake the whole time. Eventually, the whole company is looking for this missing private. It's still cold as fuck, and I start to go hypothermic. DES yells at me and tells me and another couple guys to go back to the fire barrels at the TLC. We're sitting around warming up when suddenly, a 5-ton pulls up. Engineer markings all over the 5-ton. Some guys get out. They look like real engineers, and not Tradic friends or drill sergeants. "Hey, we found this guy." They bring out the missing private. Apparently, he was found completely naked, covered in bites and cuts, 10 miles away on a bomb range. He just fucking wandered up to them and mumbled some shit and collapsed. They never found his uniform or any of his gear, and luckily, he left his rifle behind. Somehow he's okay though. The frostbite isn't severe, and the bites and cuts are superficial. I didn't get to see them myself. He went straight to the hospital, but they sent him back out in the field a day before the FTX ended. Talked to him later in the barracks. He explains that he was attacked by a quote-unquote deer on its back legs that was saying things to him in English, and he doesn't remember how he got that far away. Graduate OSUT, go to my duty station, and I never see him again. I know my story is sort of vague, since I didn't see much of it go down, but there's other green texts about this sort of thing happening at Fort Leonard Wood. It's about 3 hours drive from the nearest city or large town, and it's just fucking unexplored weird shit. The land nav courses feel spooky, like you're being watched, and I'll never go back out into the Missouri woods, if I can help it. What's the scariest thing that's happened at your work? I'll go first. Be me, 22. Work at a hair salon in a very populated city. Work day is slow, but that's fine. I don't mind sitting on my ass. Guy comes in with a woman. Guy's in his mid-50s, balding and fat. Guy introduces the woman as his quote-unquote wife. Wife is easily an 8 out of 10, dressed in a tight red dress. I introduce myself. Wife speaks very broken English, says hello in a heavy Asian accent. I can't discern where from. Guy says his wife needs a haircut. Guy has no ring on his finger, and neither does she. I don't really think about it too much, but I am getting suspicious. Start washing her hair. She looks sad. I ask if she's okay. Looks over at Guy, and she nods. I go on with cutting and styling her hair. About halfway through, the guy leaves. I ask her again if she's okay. This time, she shakes her head. Immediately get creeped out. Taught in cosmetology school to look out for human trafficking. Essentially, pimps will take their girls to salons, makeup artists, and etc. when getting them ready for a client. I ask her if she knows where she is. She says she doesn't know. I ask her what city we're in. She again does not know. Finish service, and I tell her to wait in the back room. Call manager. She calls cops. Cops come. I explain everything. They have paramedics come out. Girl goes with them. Give a description of the guy. Cops roam around but find nothing of the guy. Cops solicit security camera footage, and they leave. Owner of the salon comes in just as police leaves. They chat a bit, and eventually the cops leave. I tell the owner what happened. Doesn't seem fazed. Not even a bit. We get these little cards with a number to call for a hotline for human trafficking just a few days later. Fast forward again to last April. A human trafficking ring is busted in my city. I never knew if the guy was a part of that same ring or not, or if the girl went back to work for him. So this isn't my story, but it's one that my wife shared just the other day. It's not especially scary, but it's something that I, as a skeptic, found modestly intriguing. I won't go into much detail, but my wife coordinates big budget programs at a very important national landmark. I'm not going to name names, but if you're American or have any interest in American history, then you're already familiar with her workplace. It's a centuries-old property that receives many visitors each year, but which doesn't typically let non-employees enter the grounds after sunset, with the exception of a handful of candlelight tours each year, as well as the odd fireworks display. Anyway, to make a long story short, a small group of visiting professionals, who are being sponsored by her organization, showed up outside the site 2 nights back, buzzed security, and asked if there was any chance they could enter the grounds to take a picture of the strawberry moon. Security was purportedly a bit perplexed by the request, but, surprisingly, agreed to let them in. The officer who authorized the request told them that there were no other visitors or employees present, and that they could wander around the back of one of the main historic buildings to take their pictures, provided that they not act disruptive and do leave within 10 to 15 minutes. So these people did exactly what they said they were going to do, took some pictures, lounged in some chairs for a few minutes, and then started heading back to the entrance. On their way back around the main building, they stopped to take a picture of the iconic facade when they noticed the very obvious flicker of flame, or candlelight, inside one of the windows. They told my wife that it was very clearly emanating from inside the building, and was too bright, vivid, and dynamic to have been a reflection or a refraction. Furthermore, there were no outdoor sources of light. On their way out, they asked security to reaffirm whether they were the only persons on the property, before telling one of the on-duty officers what they saw. The officer immediately went off to investigate because A. Nobody else should have been on site. B. There are no artificial sources of light inside the building that would have been turned on or activated. And C. It's a fucking centuries-old wooden building, and an open flame is, very obviously, a hazard. Security obviously didn't find anyone there, and there was no light by the time they arrived. Here's the part that I, as an actual skeptic, find intriguing. Why does he keep saying that? Guys, I'm a professional skeptic. I don't believe in things. The visitors took photographs of the facade on their way in, which showed all of the windows being as dark and unlit as they should have been. They also took a picture of the light, which my wife showed me. It's honestly a little hard for me to explain. It's bright as fucking day, has a noticeably fire-like center, aka much darker sides of red and orange at its base, and is in the approximate shape of a period-appropriate oil lamp. There's also a bluish ring around it, of the sort that you get when you take a picture of fire. Beyond that, it also seems to be very much within the building. You can see some of the light reflected on one of the window panes. So it's not super fucking scary, but I don't believe in any of this shit, and I found it spoopy enough to not have a good explanation. Dumbass, that's called a ghost fire. Stupid. Big dummy. Order some Domino's, because I'm a fat fuck. Of lovely cheese pizza just for me. Breadsticks too, because why not? Pay online and request a delivery guy to leave it at the doorstep. I have social anxiety. Guy actually texts after dropping off my single loser meal. Text says, I left your pizza next to the garden gnome. What? I don't have a fucking garden gnome on my porch. Open front door, and find pizza box open. One slice missing. Tiny little footprints leaving the porch and down the apartment stairs. They disappear into some bushes. I've been gnomed. My face when. Week passes. I order Domino's again. This time I wait outside. Social anxiety be damned, this is my pizza, and I've got to protect it from the gnomes. Sit at my little porch table scrolling through my phone. Start to feel watched. Never experienced anything like this before. Closest thing I can liken it to is when you're leaving a room and you turn off the lights, but you feel something at your back. Sensation doesn't go away. You're rustling in the bushes downstairs. Probably just a cat. Gets pretty violent though. Bushes look like someone is literally shaking them, hoping a neighbor comes out and sees this shit. No dice. Finally, pizza arrives and the bushes stop shaking. I pay the delivery guy and I rush inside. I try to shake off the spoops. I put on a few episodes of Quantum Leap and devour my entire pizza. Go to bed. In the morning, find my porch trashed. My little table's knocked over, chair is wrecked, door looks like it's been all scratched to hell. Probably just those darn cats I heard in the bushes last night. But inside, I know, gnomed yet again. Another week passes. Things have gotten kinda bad. First, I started hearing knocks at my door. I would check to find nobody's there. This turned into taps on my bedroom wall as I slept. And that turned into a constant tapping in the walls of any room I would be in. As the week progresses, the tapping and knocks get more annoying. And they get louder too. My neighbor even pulls me aside to tell me that I'm making a lot of noise at night, and that his kids can't sleep. It's definitely not me, but I just tell him I'll keep it down. By the time I'm calling up Domino's for my Friday night pizza binge, the tapping is actually unbearable. I'm ordering a large cheese, as usual, with a scratching at my door, like a dog trying to get in. There's a tapping in the wall behind me too, as I place my order. When I'm done, I hang up the phone and make my way outside. Tapping stops as I open the door and take a seat on my ruined chair on the porch. Wait for the pizza guy to come. All quiet on the western front. Eerily quiet. First time I've heard quiet in a while. I make a decision right then and there. The delivery guy shows up. I take the pizza from him and immediately pull out a slice, drop it carefully at my feet and say, Alright, that one's yours. Pizza guy looks around trying to figure out who I'm talking to. I pay him and he hurries off nervously. I go inside with my portion of the cheese pizza and sit down on the couch. This is the first time in 2 days that the fucking apartment has been quiet at all. I soak it in for a moment. Then, I put on some candlelit and dig into some cheesy goodness. A few minutes into stuffing my face, I hear a soft tap at the door. God damn it. I get up and open the door knowing I won't find anyone. And I don't. What do you want? I left you a slice. I look down and I notice something. There were a bunch of these little mushrooms all piled together on my doorstep. I figure it's a thank you gift from the gnomes. Scoop up the mushrooms and decide to eat them with my pizza because I have no regard for my health. Before I do, I snap a pic and send it to my friend to see if he knows what they are. In the meantime, I'm snacking on them with some pizza. I eat about 3 or 4 before realizing they kind of taste like shit, and I put them aside. After a bit, Quantum Leap starts looking really fucking weird. In fact, the entire room looks strange. Text message from friend reveals that my gift was, in fact, a pile of psychedelic mushrooms. Planned on going to bed early since I have work tomorrow at 6 a.m. Instead, I trip balls until about 5 in the morning, and I go into work. Nearly lose my job that day because I can't think. Once more, and yet again, I have been fucking gnomed. Did I hear the voice of God, or was it THC-induced psychosis? Be agnostic, raised Christian. Abstain from weed for 2 months. Sis asks if I want to hit. I cave in. Lay on the couch. Feel high, stronger than ever. Later learned that I was quote-unquote greened out. Feel unbearable sense of dread and anxiety, like I'm being judged. Here, I am Jehovah in a sort of Michael Bay, Bumblebee-like way. A mixture of different voices speaking words to make one continuous sentence. Realize how my family has become godless over the years. Go to my parents' room as anxiety gets worse. Feels like my consciousness is being assaulted, and I only feel the words, God is real. Green out peaks, and every time my mind thinks, what if this is fake? My mind is slapped and shouts, this is real. Exit peak and suddenly feel peace. And I'm in this post-rapture, and that my dad was my God in the room. Tear up and hug him to say that I'm sorry for the way I lived my life. Dad is nervous. Realize that my dad isn't God, and start feeling like we're about to die in a nuclear fire within minutes. Get an unescapable feeling that I have to physically touch everyone else in the house, or they're all going to die and go to hell. Dad holds me down when I try to force my way to my showering mom to get her to touch my hand. Mind permeates. You will never know if this was real or not. Mind is fuzzy, and go to bed. Anyone have any similar experiences? Does this sound like a usual message from God? Could it be demonic? I didn't know how to process that experience, but it's been months, and I don't want to try getting it again, but at the same time, I don't want to let it haunt me. I'm unsure if it was real, a drug-induced experience, or demonic. Why would a demon want to convince me that God is real and then warn me about hell? But then again, why would I see my dad as God and feel the need to touch everyone?